Welcome to the next episode of the CAPB Podcast. Today we have Danny Bourne, ex-Royal Engineers and the founder of In the Dead Ground. Welcome, Danny.
Hello.
Thank you so much for giving up your time, mate, with the podcast. As any of our listeners or viewers can see, we are flying solo today. My younger brother, Paul, who lives in the outermost depths of Snowdonia, has a power cut, doesn't have internet, doesn't have electricity. So unfortunately, it is just me today. So Dan, the podcast, celebrating military veterans who've gone into business. So give us a highlight of your military career.
So if you were to go through the highlight reel, I joined in 2005, did Royal Engineers training. So I was a plant operator by trade, probably arguably the worst plant operator ever to grace the Royal Engineers. I think I've got it somewhere. One of the lads made a beer mat once with an award on, gave it to me, worst plantee ever. So naturally, I kind of gravitated away from that as much as I could. So I did commando course straight after training. And then prior to Herrick, when I deployed to Herrick, I did search training, which I won't lie, I probably wasn't a volunteer for. I was more voluntold, but still, you know, looking back on it now, it was a blessing because even though, man, lucky times on many occasions, like I've got no illusion how fortunate I am and my team are for all of us coming back unscathed. But you know, I was, you know, it was still shite when I did it. It was tough. It was very difficult. Then from there, you know, I served in Germany, north of Scotland, and my last job was PTI in a training regiment. So in the Royal Engineers Phase 2 Bravo, or whatever you want to call it, the trade training centre. So I was a PTI there.
Amazing, mate. It's whenever we ask like people on the podcast about their highlights, everyone always mentions the tours, you know. And no matter how difficult the op tours were, and they were difficult, it's like people always have them as a highlight, you know.
I mean, again, it's more like for me, like that would be like the highlight reel. I mean, I think like when I left the army, I didn't leave because I hated it or I didn't. Don't get me wrong, I hated it at times, and there was definite times where I was like, man, this is the worst thing on earth. But when I did leave, I left on my own terms, and I left because I felt it was the right decision to make. I mean, I absolutely loved being a physical training instructor. You know, one of the, like, again, a highlight would probably be that last job was I worked on, and well, I kind of ran with the commando and para training. Not that I'm airborne, just to sense check that. But I kind of ran with the training there and sending boys down, you know, doing commando course, P company, etc. So probably one of the privileges was, you know, getting messages with pictures like, oh yeah, X amount of lads today either, you know, received their maroon beret or green beret. So that was obviously a big privilege for me. But I think naturally with tours, it's something that I suppose you're in such extremes that it's natural that forms part of your sort of perception and vision for the future, because it is so extreme in nature. You know, it's something that 90% and even probably 90% of people who serve, they can't connect to it, but it's something that you can't explain unless people have actually done it themselves. You know, because obviously, no disrespect to anyone who doesn't go, and you know, and I was no door kicker or anything. I was just an idiot with a metal detector getting shot at most of the time as like a moving target. You know, I wasn't closing with and killing the enemy. But, you know, obviously for the guys that go out and they don't have jobs outside of the wire, even them, they can't really, you know, understand as well. So that would be my take on why that might be potentially.
There was a documentary, or a recent documentary, on, I think it's on the BBC, about the Welsh Guards in Afghanistan, and there was a scene in it, or there was a part of it where one of the troop sergeants got injured, so he was sent home to recover and then deploy back. And his wife on documentary said that she will never understand how he has that much loyalty to people who are not his blood, because he was desperate to deploy back out to theatre, as opposed to, you could just in theory stay here in our house with our kids and all that kind of stuff. And I think that's an interest, like what you were saying there, like it is difficult to explain how you get that level of loyalty to your team when you're an ops. But yeah,
do you know what? I think, it's not even true. I think it's loyalty, but it's also you take responsibility over things, like you feel responsible. Like, one of the things, and I always say this, let's just pretend I was the only person that did this, but I definitely wasn't. If you were out on a job on search and you were getting a tone to suggest that there was metal there, but you couldn't identify that it was or wasn't a device, as in you'd be, extremely sure that it wasn't, because you'd have done the necessary amount of investigation. But before you would move on, you would stand on that area to be like, there's definitely nothing there. And if you think you're only proving that for not nobody, but it's not like, oh, I'm doing this for the person next to me. I'm just doing this because this is my job. And somebody else further down the line that way could, you can't say that it's clear if you aren't comfortable standing on it. And, it's a strange thing to think about now, 16, 17 years later, that I'm like, mate, what the hell were you doing? Like that's a level of accountability that you can never hope to achieve in any role. But that is the type of thing that people would do.
I think it's a shame that Paul's not on the call, because Paul was Royal Engineers and Paul also did the job you're talking about.
Okay.
Yeah, he did the exact same job, and he's the same. We've got some crazy stories where we gob off and spin dits, usually drinking whiskey, talking about on tours. It's a real shame, actually. So, military career. You leave the military career after serving 13 years. Where did the idea come from behind In the Dead Ground? And also, what is in the dead ground?
So, I think before I talk about ITDG, I'd be remiss to not mention where it came from before that. So, when I first left, I wanted to do corporate coaching. I did some coaching, like professional coaching, training as part of resettlement. And I found it was quite a difficult industry. I was very fortunate that I met somebody also called Paul, and he helped me out, an incredible amount in terms of, really I had no background in this per se. Obviously, I've done a lot of coaching within, being a mentor for recruits, etc. But I didn't really have the experience in it. And, Paul helped me by giving me some clients and whatever else. And it was only when I was doing that to begin with, which was extremely tough. As in, it was rewarding, but it was quite tough in terms of the business aspect of it. And then shortly after, it's quite funny actually. What in my last job, I was a boot camp instructor. Basically, as in moonlighting. Used to do a bit of the old boot camp, and somebody who was on the boot camp asked me if I wanted to come down and do some speaking at an event that they ran, like a coaching event. And they said, oh yeah, the event's about support. And I was like, oh, support. I was thinking, I'm just some, like grunty ex-mil sort of guy. Like, I don't really know what I'm going to say. And then it drew me towards, like, thinking about my life and my background, experiencing where for example, my dad had a stroke, and shortly after that, my mum had had a really steep decline in their mental well-being and stuff like that. And like how I supported her, supported my brother, because they'd moved into my house at one point, and kind of just told my story, if you will. And then at the end, everyone was coming up to me like, wow, that was really impactful and stuff like that. And I was kind of like, oh, that's interesting. And it reminded me of, I did a mental health first aider course as I was leaving the army. And when I was on the course, it was quite funny. It was really like where I was thinking, man, I experience this stuff all the time related to poor mental health, whether it be anxiety, depression. And it was also like me thinking, do you know what? I've experienced this for a long time, not just, through, I can kind of trace it back, because shortly after what happened with my dad, I had a really challenging time where, in essence, I became obsessed with my own health. And I'm not talking obsessed as in going to the gym and eating. I'm talking, thinking I was going to die, basically, like as in I was going to have a heart attack, going to get cancer. At one point I thought I had a brain tumor, like completely like engulfed in this. And, I can trace that back, in a more less severe case, to being 15 and being stressed about exams. And I had a paper round and I developed like an irritable bowel way back then. And I think, you know what, there was clues here, or if I look back all that way back. So basically I thought, do you know what, if I've got this experience, I experienced this stuff anyway, it's worthwhile me looking into becoming an instructor and delivering this as a business and a course. So I did the training, and then I was doing the I had some good. The business was doing well. It was really growing nicely, and it's as I say, something I still do now. I still do deliver the mental health first aid training. And in essence, what happened was I during COVID, the old cliche COVID business coming out. But during COVID, a friend of mine and I decided, like, we were having a chat and we talked about doing a clothing brand. And do you know what? Again, I can trace that back to, I've wanted to do clothes for years. I've always been like into clothing, and I always found with training stuff that I couldn't quite get the stuff that I wanted. So, I'd always had an interest in it, even if it's not like, I've never done learning about fashion and stuff, just kind of winging it as I go along. But so like that was kind of like the beginning. And what I wanted to do was I wanted to try and I call it nurture the message. So out on social media, there is a lot of talk about mental health, but it's all empty, or not all. I couldn't say all, but there's a lot of empty stuff that, in my opinion, holds no value. It's just saying, I'm spreading mental health awareness. And I'm like, what does that even mean? Again, without being too overly critical, because I accept that these people are doing this with a positive intent, or most of them will be, at least. I'm sure there'll be some people that post this type of content with the aim of just getting cheap likes, if you will. But yeah, I thought, well, if we look on social media, I think nowadays, the way I always put it is, we're drowning in awareness, but we are super light on actual knowledge and skill. So what I in essence, came up with the concept of is come up with clothing lines that are related to different topics to do with mental health, and put in cards that can be kind of like light, I wouldn't say education, but light knowledge bombs, if you will, that people can look at, and they can either keep them or they can throw them away. They can do whatever. But again, it's either, getting them to engage with the topic in a bit more detail, or, for example, I do some outlandish clothing, as in Hawaiian shirts and stuff. Again, the aim of that is someone goes, oh, that's a bit of a wild shirt. And then, the conversation comes up of, oh, it's from this company and it's related to mental health. And So yeah, it might not be somebody going, starting a conversation as in they are in need, but it's raising the level of of the parity of esteem of mental health and well-being, getting it more towards physical health and well-being.
So
And
that
that's
was, yeah, it's fascinating. It's, as I say, when you look at In the Dead Ground and what you do on your, even on your website, it isn't just a shop. It's here's some advice. Here's places you can go. Do you know what I mean? And your aim, your mission is, let me read this out, is to reduce suicide in the veteran community.
Yeah, well, it just in general, because I don't want to. While we might be a veteran-owned company, it's not a veteran-only company. As in, yeah, there might be products that have people from the military community will have most interest in potentially, but I don't aim for this to just be a small, super niche community,
Yeah, yeah.
because it, albeit I do like to use military things as metaphors related to some of the social media stuff that we do and campaigns and whatnot. But the main reason behind that is if you think about the pockets of culture that we have, like, I don't know, industry, whether it be factories, construction, etc., people who do those types of jobs will be more likely to relate to a metaphor that's to do with the military, where it's to do with tough people or strong people, and engage more with that on their level than if I just say something like "you are strong" and "you're good" and not, because again, a lot of these people wouldn't relate to it. In my opinion, they'd be more like, "All right, well, why are you saying that?" Whereas what I want to try and do is really capture those pockets where, if we look at the communities, these are the people where actually they're probably high risk groups for poor mental health, whether that be through upbringing, whether that be through lifestyle, whether that be through, the type of perception a lot of people will have about the topic, where, man up and all that might be like ways people might, I won't say deal with it, because it's not dealing with it, is it? It's just brushing it away. But that's how they kind of will discuss the topic. Whereas actually, if we have a little bit of dialogue, like one of my favorite things to happen when I deliver training is for somebody to say something like, "Oh, this is just the new bad back, this." And I'm like, okay, I won't disagree with you if that's your opinion. But if I was to say, more people killed themselves in the 80s and 90s than they do now, would that not indicate that poor mental health was, rampant then, but we just talk about it more now? So it was still there. It's just, so in essence, the bad back could be the old mental health rather than the other way around.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
yeah.
it's really cool to see the change you can create by having this dialogue. Like, yeah, it might be a conversation that not everyone would revel in the sense of they might not want that potential for conflict. Whereas for me, I feel like we have to create an environment where people can be themselves and a little bit controversial about their opinion, in order to be able to say, okay, let's break this down and see where this has come from and if it's actually valid and logical, in a curious manner, as opposed to a "you're wrong, I'm right," which is, again, let's face it, the society we're in now, debate and discourse has kind of gone out the window a little bit.
I think, yeah, yeah. Debate and discourse has definitely gone out the window, and I think certainly social media brings a faceless ability to people just to speak for the sake of speaking, or I like to refer to as commenting as opposed to contributing. If it's a conversation, a discussion needs to have, people throw dickish remarks in there, or they can say something constructive. A couple of things that you've said. I think one of the things with mental health, and specifically men's mental health, is we absolutely talk more. Are we perfect? No, absolutely not at all. But we definitely speak more, and it's accepted now. Do you know what I mean? It's accepted. We can have conversations, and it's accepted to say, "I feel like shit," or "Have you got a minute?" and we can just have a chat. And I think that's the first thing. I think that in the dead ground message is definitely there. And I like looking at the relatable bits of kit that you do, like the Afghan rug shorts. You know, absolutely. You immediately look at that. And like Paul mentions it, like when you speak to the veteran community, like when you speak to veterans who've deployed, everyone knows the taste and smell of a warm water bottle. Do you know what I mean? It's that kind of thing. When you look at the Afghan rug, you can link to it, you can relate to it. That's the first thing. I think you're definitely the designs, the metaphors behind some of the designs, that they're brilliant. And I think the fact that it's mostly like, if you want, phys wear, isn't it? It's go in the gym. A lot of it's go in the gym wear based around that physical health, which is so important.
Absolutely.
That's go on, mate.
You know what? I try and, I won't say stay out of the phys conversation, but there's enough of it going on. So I don't feel like I need, if I'm providing or creating items that people can use for phys, that's enough for me, in my opinion. Like, don't get me wrong. You know, having athletes and whatever else, which I'm sure we might come on to a bit later on, will help build the company out. But the big thing is these are, you know, people can use them for phys, but you can use them just sitting in your house. Do what you want with them. It's for the end user at the end of the day.
Which is so I fall into the latter. So the phys I do a lot of running. So running is my escape. I run everything from 5-10Ks up to ultras, and I love running. But what I love doing in like your shorts is they're just my go-to for cutting about the house, like all of the time. The fact that they're not running shorts, and the fact that they're not like Bermuda shorts, and that they've got pockets is a game changer, by the way, mate. Normal shorts with pockets, game changer.
That's what I wanted. I wanted, like, I suppose this word gets, I won't say overused, but used a lot now, is I did want a hybrid pair of shorts that in essence you can use for most things, shall we say. I'm not going to say anything, but you know, you could wear them in the swimming pool on holiday. You can wear them, you know, sending it, doing big, like, you know, there's a guy who wears the shorts, who, you know, he front squats like 250, you know, like an absolute unit, and they work well with that. And like you say, you could wear them for running, you know, you can wear them for anything really.
I think that label of hybrid short, I think that perfectly encapsulates what they are. As I say, we've got a mutual friend in Tom Collins, and he wears the stuff when he's smashing high rocks, mate.
Yeah, yeah.
They're as effective as for high rocks as they are for me cutting about the house. So, mate, honestly, and I'm not just saying this, I really wanted to get you on the podcast because I love your gear. Love it. Do you know what I mean? I love the shorts. I think you do a great job, mate. Second thing is an interesting, and it's going back a little bit into the podcast, but you mentioned about COVID. Now, COVID's a really interesting one because there's a lot of the businesses started in COVID, and it's like trying to work out why they start in COVID. And for me, it's because people had a bit of time. They had a bit of time to go, let's explore this. Do you know what I mean? And so if we go back to that point, when was it like, was it just a let's just do it moment? Or was it, I've got this idea, I'm going to pull some sketches together and we're going to do something? Or was it let's just fucking do it and see what happens next?
Yeah, I'd say it was the latter. It was, fuck it, let's go. Let's do it. You know, and like, I think that's, I wouldn't say that's my approach to business, but I am a person that's like, right, you know, when I was in the military, I was always the guy that would, like, probably why I only reached the dizzying heights of corporal after 13 and a bit years. You know, I was one of those guys where I'd always be like, let's see if we can make it happen, and I'll worry about the consequence later, you know. So if there were, and at times I definitely rebelled a little bit against the hierarchy. I was never in trouble. I was always like a good boy, if you will. But I would, if I didn't think something was right, I wouldn't accept it. I was the guy that, a bit like, we had a little chat off air, didn't we, about Band of Brothers? A bit like when Winters is like, oh, I'll take the court martial. That was what I'd be like. If someone's trying to argue me for nothing, I'd be like, or something I perceived as not being the case, I'd be like, okay, fine, I'll speak to the sergeant major. When they're like, when someone would be like, oh, you'll have to, and I'd be like, fine, I'll go and speak to them.
Yeah.
So I think that kind of, I wouldn't say cavalier, but that kind of like back yourself attitude is probably something where what's probably I'm a big believer in duality. Like, I don't believe there's such thing as a strength that doesn't provide some sort of weakness, or there's nothing that's not a drawback. So, I think that attitude is good because it means you will go for the gap, you will try to explore things. But at the same time, it does mean that you will make mistakes. And I certainly have made many a mistake as I've gone along throughout my military career and or business. So it is what it is.
There's a really interesting quote from she was a US Navy officer back 40, 50 years ago. Her name was Grace Hopper, right? So first of all, she was female spearheading in software development, then joined the US Navy and was spearheading as a leader. And what she said, the quote is, and it's been thrown around many, many times, which is, better to beg forgiveness than to ask in the first place.
Yeah.
And the reason she said it was because she was in the US Navy, and the amount of hierarchy and, do you know what I mean, like politics to get anything pushed over the line was so extreme that she would, well, let's make a decision for the good and benefit of the cause, and we'll beg forgiveness later if it's not right. And I love that. And I love that that sounds true to yourself when you were serving.
I think that's why, like, I probably, again, this was a slightly off-air chat earlier, but I think that's probably why I've never worked for anyone. I just kind of like, but I also don't feel like I actually have a job. I kind of, I'm sort of self-propelled and kind of get shit done, but I don't actually ever feel like I have a job, other than if I'm ever delivering a course and I start and finish at home. So say, I've got a client that I do stuff for reasonably often in Ellesmere Port, which you mentioned your family's from, or your dad's side of the family. I've got a client. So if I get up in the morning, like go do fizz, go do that, come back, then I feel like I actually have a job. But that's like, I don't know, 5 to 10 days a year max. So it's kind of
there's that other quote, isn't it? And it's find something you love doing and you'll never work a day in your life. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, there is a bit of that. Like, don't get me wrong, it is hard. Like, I think people, especially with clothing, this is why you will see clothing companies pop up and evaporate. It is extremely hard business to actually to grow in, unless, I'm not going to say you're lucky, because that is, isn't fair, because you may have done everything right. But I think unless you can fully align all of your actions and take the appropriate actions at the right time for growth, it is an extremely difficult business. And as I say, that is why so many companies just pop up and evaporate, because I've got like a life cycle in my head of your early clothing companies, and it happens every time. So you start, all your mates buy stuff, and then you're like, okay, I'll do some more stuff, and then they kind of might buy again, and then you're trying to go bigger and better and maybe a bit more outside the box, and then eventually I wouldn't say run out, but eventually people either have enough of your gear, or they're they don't want that product in particular or something. And then you get to this stopping point where you've got, I don't know, maybe up to 1,000 followers on your social media, but active, engaged buyers you probably don't have a lot of, or enough variety of, and then you're in. I won't say trouble, but you're in tough territory, because you need to continue producing things. You haven't got a great deal of capital and cash flow, and really getting stuff off the ground is so difficult because there's minimum order numbers and whatever else. So you might think, oh, this product will be great, but you just haven't got the either the capital or the fans to be able to get it going. So you do, again, you've got to take risks. You've got to deal with what I call bombs, where you think something's going to be good and then it doesn't work. And there's a lot of things. It's much more complicated than people think, as in, oh yeah, I'll just start selling t-shirts. It doesn't work like that.
It's fascinating listening to you talk. It's like fascinating, right? Because you're absolutely right. You see it all the time. You see a clothing line, a t-shirt, and you think, I love that t-shirt. And then you think, oh, I'm going to release another one. You think, doesn't quite have the same hit that. I really liked the first one because I saw it was veteran owned and I thought it's doing the right thing. And then you're like, no, I'm okay, thanks. But in the dead ground seems to be growing all the time. And you seem to be churning out like new designs, new ideas, new themes, which is what I really like about it. But I'll ask you, before we go on to sort of like the themes, ideas, things that are coming in the future, I'd like to ask, and I guess it links into that, which is, what's the biggest lesson you've learned in business? Because you're a clothing range. Like you said, you're like, it isn't a popularity contest. It's I'm providing good quality product, and it's standing the test of time. So, what's the biggest lesson you've learned?
But it is a popularity contest at the same time, because you have to. If you're not popular, you're not in business, are you?
Yeah, fair, totally fair.
I suppose I'm going to link this, like we discussed this off air, but there's so many lessons I could say, and I could probably talk for over an hour of things that reflections. I suppose I'm going to say two things, and we've kind of covered this ground a little bit. I would say, well, again, I'm building this by the second day. Maybe three things. First of all, like a lesson for me is try and do a bit of research. And when I say that, I mean, like, I started this, like, me and my friend, like, he left the business eventually because he was still serving, and he just, with his operational tempo and whatnot, he just could not actually be a part of it. So what I would say is you got to do your research, because when we started this company, I had zero idea. Like, for example, clothing, a lot of the time you get what's called a GSM, which means grams per square meter. So I literally didn't have a clue what that even meant. And I'm trying to produce clothes and I don't know what GSM is. So it's kind of like things like that is really important. Just have some knowledge. But, again, it doesn't need to be, I'm not saying you need to go and do a degree in fashion. Read Shoe Dog, read Shoemaker. Shoemaker's a really cool book, actually. A lot of people have heard of Shoe Dog, which is Phil Knight, Nike founder, but not as many people, especially, there you go, not as many people will have heard of Shoemaker, which is about Joe Foster, who was the founder of Reebok, guy from Bolton, so actually it's very relatable for us and or me, because he's very local, veteran, so for me, I was able to really that's doing research, that's learning. Second thing would be expect adversity. This will not be or you won't have it all. I would be extremely confident. I'm not going to say you won't, but I would be extremely confident that you will not have it all. You will have times where, do you know what? I've had times, right, where I'll give you a specific example. I can recall I was doing an event once and I had 9 pence in my business account. 9 pence. And this was, I won't say recently, but this, the company's nearly 5 years old. This wasn't like the first year or two. This was like a couple of years in, because I had gambled and gone, right, I'm going to buy this stock and do this and whatever else. So, you've got to expect adversity and you've got to try and ride that wave out. And then I think the final thing is probably it takes time. It isn't, again, and these two tie in together. You've got to be able to endure and then think, right, this will get better. This will improve, because if not, that's why so many people wrap when they start these businesses or when they go and do arduous courses in the military or when they, do things in their line of work and it gets a bit too tough. It will get better, but it's not going to happen overnight.
Do you? I mean, that's fantastic advice, right? And I think to link one of them, do you think you did your commando course, which is an arduous course, really difficult, do you think that kind of exposure to extreme physical adversity and your deployments and stuff helped prepare you for the hard times in business?
Probably. I mean, I'd not thought about it directly, but I'll give you an example. When I was on my beat up, I never ever considered quitting. I always was, when I say, don't get me wrong, I was like, I'm going to die here potentially. But, it was always, I will be told you are not good enough before I will personally quit. And I suppose when I've been doing this, I probably haven't even considered quitting. I'm not going to be like, got that dog in me, son. But, it's just not really in my DNA, if you it should, again, as I say, not that there hasn't been times where I've gone, nah, I'm not going to do that, or yeah, I've had enough of this. It's more just because I want this, I'm not going to give it up is probably a good way to describe it.
Yeah, it's the whole approach and things that you can link back to the military is fascinating. And I think there's things that you don't relate to. There's things that you think that didn't help me. But when you dig deep a little bit, you think, yeah, maybe that helped a little bit. We're coming towards the end of the podcast. We're coming towards the end of the podcast, Danny, and it's been a fascinating conversation, and it's been a really interesting and brilliant look at your journey and where you've come so far. As you say, in the Dead Ground's 5 years old. It's a brilliant, well-respected clothing brand, and it's only on the up. What's next? What's the future hold for In the Dead Ground?
I mean, I think the big thing this year I want to focus on is upgrading our content, and as a result, doing more for our supporters in the sense of providing maximum value that we can in the sort of content sense, where people are then going to be really, it's not like you mentioned earlier, the aim is not just to be a clothing brand, it's about providing service in the sense of, on our reels, on our feed, people can go to those reels and get value just by having a look through them. So, improving that content is definitely going to be one of them. Another one is really trying to put ourselves on the map when it comes to sports, because like you say, if we've got products that can be used in multiple arenas in sports, then, let's put that to the test. Let's get people out there, doing their thing. And we're going to help support that. What I want to say, though, connected to that, is that I don't want every man and their dog to be connecting with us saying, "Oh, I'm doing," because I do get a hell of a lot of people wanting free stuff, and you got to provide some sort of value in order for us to do that. That is a really difficult thing, actually, people wanting freebies. But I'd say definitely trying to get ourselves out there and build the credibility in the delivery, shall we say, as opposed to where we're at now, where the day-to-day people value and like the kit. It's trying to build that sort of, I'm not going to say elite, because I don't want to. I'm not aiming at just being elite, because that's not the aim at all. Because we're in every day, every person, if you will. But we can compete, so why not?
I think it's fascinating, mate. I think, and you're absolutely right. It's an interesting thing. Giving away free stuff's an interesting one. It's an interesting comment, because lots of veteran-owned companies offer military discount. I don't ask most of the time. I don't ask. Do you know what I mean? Because you think, if you're veteran-owned, you're not doing it because you're not like Nike trying to make the next millions. You're paying your mortgage out of this. And a lot of veteran-owned companies do stuff at such a good value, good product. That's what they're looking at, So I think it's like the freebies is a. I totally get it.
Do you know what? No, it's honestly, I'm happy if someone comes to me, right, and articulates a value proposition that can show me that I'm not just chucking them stuff for no reason. I do not mind doing that. But the problem is you'll get people who'll not have much profile, and they have got no way of demonstrating any value to you, that want stuff, and you kind of like, I don't get what you wouldn't go up to somebody in the street and say, "Can I have a tenner off you?" But people do take this approach for some reason when it comes to stash. Again, as I say, I'm not against. I give loads of stuff away. I have plenty of things that I have for promotional items and just chuck in for stuff, but I'm not going to be giving away care packages and whatnot to everyone, pure and simple.
I'm thinking a collaboration here, a coffee and poo bag pair of shorts. With the design, I'm thinking that, it could be like up there. You might sell at least 3 pairs.
With like a belt loop that you can put the poo bag on or something.
Oh, you see, this is the future. This is the
like
next.
A little carabiner.
Little carabiner, mate. And then the next thing will be getting the logo onto poo bags. But I think we're a bit away.
Whoosh.
Danny, listen, I understand you're a busy man. Thank you so much for giving us your time on the podcast. I can't wait to see what's next from ITDG. And as a specific mention, which I'm looking forward to, is the Bastone edition of the clothing. Because, first of all, Band of Brothers is an incredible series, but the Bastone edition, focusing on the medic, I'm loving it. So
yeah,
that,
old Eugene. Again, Band of Brothers is something that I've always, I remember watching it in 2002, but I think now the more it goes on, the more actually appreciation you get for it and whatever else, and those those men and women that were involved within that struggle is just amazing, isn't it? What they went through. But yeah, thanks for inviting me on and giving me the platform. So that's awesome. Thank you very much.
Brilliant, Danny. Thank you so much.
Cheers, mate.